I now just want to explain two metaphysical problems, two problems of ontology that really have persisted throughout the ages and have concerned many people. I think probably including most of us. We've at least given some thought to it. Now, the first of these metaphysical problems is something that's sometimes called the mind-body problem. And let me give it to you in the classical perspective. That is, I'll give it to you the way they thought about it in ancient Greece. Now, there are religious views that there is a life after death, right? So the question is, how could there be such a thing? Even in ancient mythology, ancient Greek mythology, there were these stories about Hades, the place that you went to after you died, so that you had this soul that continued on, that you don't go out of existence, but your soul continues on. So the question is there a soul that lives on after we die? And in the classical world, in the classical Greek world, what they worried about, or what drove them to think about this, one of the things that drove them, is how are you able to entertain thoughts about philosophy, but the desk sitting there is not? You're different. And the explanation is that you have a soul. Thinking of it similarly, that is, if you have a magnet, what explains the fact that the magnet attracts certain metal and your thumb does not attract that metal? Well, there's this theoretical entity. We say there is this property called magnetism that certain objects have, and that's what attracts it. Similarly, that's exactly the view that many people take, that we have this soul, and that's what enables us to think, but not desks, and that's the thing that lives on after we die. I'm going to put up a discussion board about the mind-body problem. What's your view about this question? How do we answer? Is there something that lives on after we die? And what is it that does our thinking? Why are we able to think, but other physical objects are not? Second question, was sometimes called the problem of free will and determinism. In its ancient form, they were really worried about something called fatalism. And I'll explain what fatalism means in a second. But let's talk about free will first. We all seem to think that this sentence is true. That is, people sometimes act freely, that we have free will. Maybe it's not all the time. That is, your heart keeps beating. That's not something that you're conscious. Maybe you can affect it, but you don't. It doesn't stop beating because you're not actually beating it, so to speak. But you turned on the video. You came to class. Those are things that you've done with your own free will. Now consider something else, and this is where the determinism comes in. When we think about it from a scientific perspective, we say every event has a cause. If you get on the bus and the bus stops working, they call the mechanic to find the cause. If the mechanic comes and he says, okay, everybody off the bus, well, what's the problem? Well, the bus just isn't moving. There's no explanation. We don't think that makes sense because we think everything that happens has a cause. So determinism is true. And that's also led people, that and other things have led people to think, well, whatever happens, whatever's going to happen in the future is fated to happen. That is, I can't determine what's going to I can't influence what's happened in the past, and maybe I think I can, but I'm wrong. I can't influence anything in the future because all of that is determined, and I just have to follow fate on this. And that's actually a concept from ancient Greece. Well, when we take these two propositions that we think are true, when we think about a third one, it looks like those two things are not compatible. They can't both be true. That is, our actions are just events that happen. So if we act freely, they can't be caused. If they're caused, we can't act freely. So I'm going to put up a discussion, a thread on this also. And why don't you guys weigh in on where you think the answer to these questions lies?